How's it going, everybody? Today I am with Emily Molly and MundaneMatt, and we just got back from the James Damore event at Portland State University. There were some protests, some good conversation. This is the Culture War Podcast. So today at Portland State University, there was a panel discussion with James Damore, Heather Hying. I don't remember Helen's last name. I feel bad. Do you guys?
Rose.
What is it?
Pluckrose?
I think Pluckrose.
Pluckrose.
Yeah.
And Peter Boghossian. It was introduced by Andy Ngo, who's one of the organizers, and then Brett Weinstein came up and made a statement. All of it's very interesting. Before we get into all of that, I've got to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor for helping make this video possible.
Virtual Shield is a virtual private network service that can help keep you and your data safe as you browse the web. Whether it's a hacker, big business, or government actor, your data can be stolen and spied on. With Virtual Shield, you can protect your privacy and add a simple layer of defense to your internet browsing. Virtual Shield also offers IdentiSafe, which can provide increased levels of security for those that are looking for more. They can help monitor your computer in the background and periodically scan your computer to make sure you're not at risk, and even block remote access to your webcam and microphone. Keep in mind, no security is perfect, but with a VPN, you're adding a simple but effective layer of defense to protect your privacy and your data. Go to virtualshield.com/Timcast and use the promo code TIMCAST to get 20% off and no payments for 30 days. There is never a guarantee of security, but that doesn't mean we don't lock our doors and take effective measures to protect ourselves and our families. For those that are interested, I've included the link to Virtual Shield below.
So, most people, they're following my videos. They know where I'm going, so they know I got here. But I'm curious how you got here, when you got here, and why you came.
Well, I used to live in Portland. In fact, I grew up here. So this is kind of like my city as any other one, now I live between Seattle and Portland, and so someone sent me the link to come down here for this James Damore speech. And I'm like, well, this is cool. This guy caused a lot of trouble, and there could be some protests, and I could make a nice video off of it.
Did you make a video?
I did not, because there's nothing there that was really, I think, drama worthy in terms of the protests. But I really enjoyed the conversation. I actually mostly came because I wanted to see what he had to say. I wanted to see what the others had to say, and I found it to be pretty enlightening because I had some thoughts that I maybe had never really attributed before to kind of the context of what they were saying, and I just was pretty involved in the whole hour and a half event.
That sounds very typical and normal for any college lecture. Someone gets notified there's an event and says, hey, I'll go check it out. Right, but the reason I'm bringing that up is because so much of these events has been psychosis, protesters running in and screaming, and like controversy and smear campaigns, and then your story is basically like, oh, I heard about it, decided to come down and hear people what they had to say, and it's like, yeah, that is mundane, I guess.
It is. I live up to my namesake, obviously, but no, I think part of it is too because a lot of what I cover tends to be like social justice commentary or what happens with the, I guess you could say, the regressive left. And the treatment that happened to James as a result of that memo, which is ultimately benign in terms of being a terrible, horrible, nasty thing.
Yeah, seriously.
It
Tepid.
was very mundane. But I wanted to see kind of how he would apply it to, I guess, what would real-world scrutiny. Because we can all read it, we can all disseminate it, we can all talk about it. But I wanted to see what he had to say. And I also know a bunch of people in Portland, figure it was going to be a good time.
Yeah.
And it got me out of the house.
There you go.
So there we go.
So I'll just say, I mean, I assume there's probably some people who don't know who James Damore is, which I would find kind of surprising. But I know you exist, so I don't mean to be rude. But James Damore was an engineer working for Google. He drafted a memo about perceived problems within Google, diversity and inclusiveness. And actually, I think it's fair to say that the memo was an attempt to rectify the lower percentage of women. Is that would you guys agree with me?
As what he explained, yes.
Yeah, because he talked about how can we get more women to want to be involved. Maybe we can change the workplace a little bit for women.
Yeah, he had some really some suggestions that I thought made sense, and I feel like instead of just
as a woman, it made sense to you.
Yeah, no, I feel like for the points that he made, his suggestions for the differences between men and women, his suggestions made sense.
Yeah, except the media ran with sexist frat boy says women are biologically inferior to men. Yeah, like seriously,
Look at
James Damore
and go like, is that really a tech bro?
Oh, amazing.
Really?
Opposite.
He looks 90 popounds soaking wet. Right?
Right.
You're not going to look at James Damore and go like, that dude's into frat parties.
No,
Serious.
like even meeting
or
him,
drinking.
Yeah.
Dude, pretty sure doesn't drink.
Meeting him, it's like he's very, I don't want to say like soft spoken, but he's very much like, I feel like he takes a logical approach to things. He's not very bombastic with his opinions or his viewpoints. I feel like he's a very level-headed person.
Well, we were having dinner and someone explained, it was Peter, he asked, he says, does James use a lot of emotional language? And a couple of people were like, nope. No, it's like very calm, reasoned.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those that are listening, watching, we actually have a nice little interview with James about the event, and there's some stuff we need to talk about before we show it so that it makes sense. But, for one thing, yes, they were protesters. One woman, I think she tried to, like, rip out the sound equipment or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know, is it too soon to show, like, one of the videos from the protesters that you talked to?
So I talked to, before the event happened, I went out and I talked to a lot of the people lining up. And as I was interviewing people who were lining up, I saw a group of protesters come in with these big, lots of boards, lots of signs. And so I went up and I asked them, what are your signs? And I can play the clip.
Yeah, do it. Let's check it out.
Our signs are featuring important women in the field of computer science who have made significant contributions. We're here standing up against misogynist principles being expressed in the tech industry.
Okay. Is there anything specifically that was said? Are you protesting the memo, or is?
Yeah, the memo and also the support of this kind of message. I think this kind of message doesn't deserve a platform. It deserves to be debated, but
what's the message?
In my mind, it's presenting a view of women as less capable, as less deserving.
What was your thoughts after reading the memo?
It's garbage. I don't know.
Yeah. Was there anything specifically that stood out?
I think the belief in women as being less capable, that's just absurd to me.
I'm just trying to think of what in the memo, where did it say that?
I don't have it,
Okay.
to quote for you.
Okay.
You roasted that guy.
I didn't even
that was
try
brutal.
very hard. I was actually trying to be nice too, because like,
No. Where in the memo does it say that?
You're right, asking a little leading questions, I think, to jog his memory, but you can tell he never read the memo.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You roasted him.
That's why I tried to, like, I know that was kind of like, what was, is it the memo you're protesting? And he said, yeah, it was the...
But you were like, where in the memo did it say that? Because it didn't.
Which page, which paragraph, which word? I need it now.
The memo didn't say that.
That's what.
So look, okay, I think that was a protester at the James Damore event saying the message of the memo was that women are less capable. When in reality,
and less deserving.
Yeah. When in reality, the memo was basically like, hey, we have an inclusivity problem. We should change these things so we can get more women here. James Damore was like, we need more women here.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. That, you know what, man? I feel like I try to be balanced, try to be reasonable, fair, whatever you want to describe it. But, okay, so last week, if for those that haven't seen it, we were at the University of Washington, and Emily tried interviewing a bunch of activists and protesters and Antifa. And when, finally, Emily, you're able to get this interview with this Antifa medic, they say a bunch of, I'm not trying to be a dick, but insane shit. I shouldn't swear.
I wouldn't say insane either. It's just, I feel like it's a warped perception. Like, it makes no sense. It is delusional, but... I feel like it's a mentality that's fed by other members of their group, where they're just like, this is the enemy, this is what they believe, and they repeat it to each themselves like over and over until it becomes fact.
What bugs me about it is that I want to give him a fair shake, but then when you do this interview and you're like, literally, so what was the message of the memo, and it's like he made it up. Like, I don't get it. Wired recently published a story saying James Damore said women were less capable. That's just not in the memo. It's
the only thing they can do right now. Okay, is as we know, outrage, clickbait gets clicks. And there's a war on advertising right now across all mediums of the internet. So they have to do the exact same thing a lot of other people do that are the extremists that put out this kind of very clickbaity content to get you in. Yeah, a lot of it's BS. A lot of it's crap. And you could tell with these people, like, the thing is too, Portland, I don't know if you know this, but PSU was running the true story of women in tech panel, I think, right beforehand. So I think those cards legitimately came from that panel.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes sense, like, oh yeah, the first person who made a computer, invented the internet.
You know, I'm all down for showing the accomplishments of women.
I think it's great. Yeah, I feel like that would fit in more with the panel.
Yeah.
Than against it.
So let's also point out that yesterday I did an interview with Andy. I'm terrible at pronouncing his last name, but it's like Nyo, who was one of the organizers, who said they invited every tenure and tenure track professor from gender studies to be on the panel. And I'm trying to be fair, assuming that's true, because you don't gotta trust everybody, but assuming it's true, they weren't there. There was one woman who showed up at the end and said, "Will you come to my event and do a round table?" And it's like,
she agreed too, so I'm curious to see if she'll actually
maybe they'll do it. But Peter Boghossian is a philosophy professor, right? Yeah. He was a bit combative. I think even when she asked him, she said, "Will you come to one of our events and come down?" And his response was, he says, "Are you gender studies? Well, why don't you come to my event?" Simple answer should have been like, "You got it." He was a bit combative. He was a bit aggressive.
Yeah, he eventually got to that point of where he agreed, but I think because he has trouble hearing, I think. And so it might have been he might have perceived her tone, because it felt like she was a bit aggressive in terms of, like, I want James and you to come to my event, like thinking it's going to be right now or tomorrow or something. And he's like, go talk to his agent. And then she kept kind of pressing it, but then turned it to him. And I think at that point, the wires got crossed, miscommunication. And there's also the implication of, oh, well, here you guys are above us. You're looking down on us. She started bringing that stuff out. And so he got defensive because he's like, nobody explained it. There's nowhere else to sit.
Well, the interesting thing is, like, when we got there really early. We got there like 2 hours early. And, they had it set up differently when we first got there. They had the panel chairs on the ground level with everyone else. But then people brought in, they knew they were going to have a lot more people, so they brought in a lot more chairs, and they're like, we're not going to have room for them to sit on the same level. Yep. Okay. So they pushed them up onto the platform.
But just for context, for people who may have, I feel like we know what happened. Yeah. But it was essentially a woman who came up during Q&A and who said, why don't you come down from the stage and do a round circle event with us later? And then, I mentioned, like, I felt like Peter was a bit... Not just in that. I don't think Peter is like overly aggressive. I think he was just a bit aggressive, right? So, do you have footage of that? I want to bring up. I talked to James in the interview we did with him, but I want to cover some things before getting into it, because something happened as we were leaving the event. Before I mention this, I'm wondering if you have footage of when the protester tried to rip out the audio cables.
I do, but I was in the front of the room.
But there's like some audio of it happening.
Yeah, I've got it from my vantage point.
Yeah. Yes. We'll just play a little bit of it if you can.
Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact?
There's always a stand-up.
So I would say, you could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality. So men and women are different on height. They're different on muscle mass. They're different on where fat is deposited on our bodies, right? Our brain.
You're very brave. Cowards! Security! Alright, well, we're going to raise our voices. The conversation's going to go on.
So this is at 6:30. The protest was the planned walkout. You all know this. You guys don't. And sure enough, at 6:30, you hear someone yell, "It's 6:30. We're out." And I kid you not, about 7 people out of the couple hundred that were there get up. I was actually kind of, I thought it was gonna be a lot more.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, one of the protesters walked up to the sound booth, and I guess she grabbed some of the cables. She did something. I couldn't really see what it was. I chased her out and saw the police going after her. This woman was livid, and it was kind of sad. Out in the hallway. So I actually left the event at this point, and inside everybody's talking, Heather's talking about evolutionary biology, and Peter's talking philosophy, but outside, the police were having a conversation and writing up this woman who tried to disable the sound equipment, and this woman is frantic going, I don't understand. The people in there, why are they listening to this? They're being brainwashed by him. This is misogyny. But I felt bad. I felt so bad. I was like, dude, I really wanted to give her a hug and be like, it's not that bad. Like, I don't know who's telling you the world is ending. I don't know who is telling you this man wants to destroy your life, to hurt you and kill you. James Damore is a very quiet, shy guy. It is not that crazy,
he's not the Antichrist.
But it kind of, it bums me out to see this, like, desperate plea from somebody who maybe she just realized she was the outlier.
Well, and that was an interesting thing. I think it was going to be a lot more people walking out, but Brett Weinstein gave his introduction before he was introducing people, and I even told him, because I talked to him before the event, and I said, I said something like, there's going to be a walkout, and he was like, wow, really? And like he seemed kind of like, I don't want to say excited, but he seemed like, well, that was new information to him, and he's like, can I use that information? I was like, I mean, it's public, it's on a public Facebook event. So in his intro,
you're saying that you influenced the outcome.
I didn't mean, like, I'm glad that more people stayed as a result of it, because in his introduction, I can play a clip, but...
We actually have, like, footage of the entire event. I don't know if it makes sense to play all of it, because...
No, it doesn't.
I'll be honest, like, a lot of the stuff that was said was stuff we all have heard time and time again. The Q&A was the core of this event, and when we have clips from the Q&A. But let's just show the clip from Brett and his introduction.
Yeah.
Hello, Portland. Let me say this is an unusual spot for me to be in. Usually I'm on the hot seat. Not tonight. Tonight I get to introduce the panel, which is a position of luxury, comparatively speaking. But I also get to take care of some business that I think we need to address if this is going to work out to all of our benefit. There is, of course, a lot of protests surrounding tonight's panel, and because they never cease to plan these things publicly online, there is also apparently a walkout that is planned for this evening that will, of course, disrupt the panel and confuse things. And I would like to invite those who are intending to walk out to reconsider. In order to make it clear why I think you should, I want to tell you, maybe it's an anecdote. For my whole adult life, I have been attending talks. Some of them are from people that I agree with, some of them are from people I disagree with. And sometimes I think the people that I'm listening to are actually a bit dangerous. When that happens, I have something I do, which is I sit in the audience and I listen carefully to what they are saying, and I try to formulate a question, one sentence, at most 2 sentences, that will reveal the hypocrisy. If you're planning to walk out, I would argue that that is a cowardly move. You will do nothing important by walking out, other than having taken up seats that might have been occupied by somebody who was interested in listening to what the panelists had to say. I would suggest instead of walking out, what you do is you formulate that devastating question and then deliver it in the Q&A. If you're right, it will have a pretty interesting effect, I promise you. If I'm right, that the panelists are actually making important points and that they're ones that are well worth all of our consideration, you'll discover that too. So, let me now introduce the panelists.
So I think it's great that he said that, because I'm...
Will they call people cowards?
Well, not that part.
That kind of caught me off guard, a little bit.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
but then also looking at the Evergreen situation as a whole and like kind of what he's been used to in terms of pushback, he probably just doesn't care. He's out of work. He's not working in academia right now. He's there. He's like,
I do think, though, that was an appeal to people who are like, I'm not a coward, I'll stay, like, I don't know, it might have worked, but I do think that less people walked out, to his point that they wanted to stick around and ask their questions and make their point.
Yeah. Well, he said, if you don't ask that question, you're a coward, essentially.
Yeah.
I think Brett's a nice guy, but I really do feel like that statement was him getting an emotional release.
Yes.
Like, he has been attacked by these people. Brett and his wife both resigned from their jobs of, 14, 15 years?
Yeah.
You like, the guy's got a smile on his face, and he's taken this in stride, but I can imagine that, there's anger there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he said it, I think he's done a really good job of staying on top of the game and being rational, even amidst probably what's been a very emotional year for this guy. So I kind of felt it when he said, "You're cowards." I was like, that was more than just saying you would be a coward. I feel like that was him actually saying, in general, you people are cowards. Because the reason he said this, it's not because this one event. In my opinion, I think it has to do with this is what happens all the time. When I talk about you trying to get an interview with people and they don't want to do it, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. We know this happens. It's so hard to get an interview with someone on the left. I did an interview with a woman in, was it Berkeley? And I think it was Berkeley. And then she walks into my camera, starts talking. I ask her some questions. After about 10 minutes, she goes, "You know what? Delete all that. No, don't use it." And I'm like, you walked up to my camera during my interview while I was talking to somebody else, and you're on camera. So I did her a favor. I blurred her face. But that's like as close as I've gotten to getting someone like this to actually do an interview. Yeah, I feel like, one of the challenges with the event was, first of all, in the interview I did with James, I flat out said it's like a circle jerk.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of people in the audience who agree with the people on the stage, and they talk about things, they laugh together, and they clap, and someone makes a joke, and they get it, and I'm like, then you have the protesters there who feel like outsiders, who don't fit in. There's some adversarial statements like, if you don't stay, you're a coward, or,
Well, they don't fit into that group. But they had multiple events before this where they were the majority. And they had their time in their own circle jerk. And this was them trying to bring their circle jerk into another circle jerk.
All right, we can say it. Yeah, sure.
You figured with the whole day of jerking, they would have wanted to finally finish at that particular event.
They'd be so tired, they'd just pass out. And just
I guess that's what happened.
Yeah.
Really, because I was expecting there to be this big how to do. I was all like, all right, I got my GoPro, I got my camera, gonna go in there.
But that's the bummer, that they did their event and circle jerked each other. Oh God, we're just gonna say this. Okay, pat each other on the back.
Yes.
Then this event happens, everybody pats each other on the back. Well, going back to the protester, because I was prefacing the woman pulling the cords for a reason. As we were leaving the event, and we will go back to the Q&A stuff. I am jumping the gun a little bit, but I was mentioning as the crowd was walking out, the woman who was frantically and desperately being like, "What's happening?" And James looked hurt. James Damore, he looked kind of sad.
Yeah.
And then I kind of stopped talking about it because the conversation changed, but then he brought it back up. He's like, wait, what happened? What was she saying? And I felt really bad because I feel like James is this really calm, he's kind of a sweet guy. He's kind of just a calm, nice guy. He's really quiet, really shy. And I felt like he was genuinely hurt that somebody would say those things about him, would feel that way about him, and I don't know, accuse him of being a bad guy when he's trying to help. God, it hurts me. I feel so bad. Dude's nice.
I don't think he anticipated what was going to happen. I mean, he even said himself that the wording was not the best.
Yep.
Because he's he says at the thing, he wrote this for an engineer. This wasn't meant to be leaked to the public.
Yeah.
And so the public perception of the words used were very technical. These words were technical, and so we're not, I guess, well, we maybe are, but other people aren't, at least on the left and the news. They look at this as being attack with very aggressive words. So I think that was a big part. I think it caught him off guard.
Yeah.
Because my impression of him a little bit was he was a little bit in shell shock is what I took from that. Some of the facial expressions he was making when people were talking or kind of disagreeing, he kind of had this not sure what's quite going on. And I'm just like, is he afraid someone's going to shoot him? And I'm looking at people in line going that guy's got a coat on. He looks kind of angry.
Well, we should move into the Q&A a little bit. Mm-hmm. We're trying to keep this in chronological order. I know I've jumped out a little bit. But there were some Q&As that were really good, and one thing I think is funny is every time someone asks a question, Peter's like, "That was a great question." Everyone claps. I'm like, "Come on," but I understand why he's doing it because he wants them to feel welcome.
Yeah.
But there was one instance where there were these three people who were not asking a question, were just I don't even know what they were doing.
I felt like they were platforming
right.
themselves, their own sort of
grandstanding.
Grandstanding. Yeah.
Did you have a clip of it? Yeah, let's play it.
I feel like they were the ones that were meant to walk out. When they stayed.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
And so I'm really glad that they stayed, and even though they didn't really have much to add, at least they didn't walk out and make a scene. They just saved their scene.
Well, they did make a scene. What do you mean?
They made a scene, but they didn't do it in the same way that the woman who tried to rip all the cords out.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, we'll play that.
Okay. Hi. So.
What's your name?
I'd rather not say my name because I know the tendency for people in this room to dox people. So, quite frankly, it's not that hard to find out my name.
What is that?
Really
The tendency of the people in the room?
For people to dox people, it's happened to plenty of my friends.
Okay,
specifically by people in this room,
no
like
doxing.
people behind me, but hey.
So what's your question?
We're getting into that. All right, so up with me are a couple of my comrades. We have done, yes.
So what's your question?
Yes, I'm getting into that right now, if you'd let me finish. Alrighty, so I want to talk a little bit about diversity of thought. So you brought up how you think there should be a diversity of ideas, and that you think that academia is shutting down ideas. And all three of us have seen that too, but we're wondering why you're not talking about that. In our time at PSU, we have tried to do protests, we have tried to talk to the Board of Trustees, and you know what happens? We get shut down. We get shut down by cops who are threatening us. We are not allowed to table in the park blocks just because South will not let us to. And our ideas are constantly being shut down, and yet you think you're the ones whose ideas are not being heard, where we're trying to do everything in our power to get our ideas out there. And
your
so
ideas should not be shut down. Your ideas should not be shut down, and whoever it is who's shutting you down, look, I'm happy if you want, you don't tell me your name, I'll come after, we will walk into my dean's office personally, and I'll make sure you guys get a table.
No, I'm not trying to draw any problem here, but what I sort of problematize is like if you're talking about you want to make sure somebody has the capacity to have free speech, right? But you literally just interrupted her in the middle of speaking.
Yeah, because she wasn't asking a question.
What I'm saying is, like, yeah, what I'm trying to say.
So what's your question?
I don't really have a question. I'm just trying to.
Okay, well, only questions. That's why I said in the beginning we only take questions. We only take questions. Next. If you have a question, ask it. If you have a question, ask it. What's your question? All right, next up. Ask your question. We'll get as many questions. That's not a question. Maybe we need to talk about what a question is. All right, next one.
Well, what I thought was funny was she was talking and kept rambling on forever. Peter Boghossian kind of shuts her down, get her to get to the point. Then he gets accused of mansplaining by the other guy, who's then basically talking on behalf of her.
Exactly.
And I'm just looking at this from a distance going, you guys realize what just happened, right? Like, this is beautiful.
No,
this is so beautiful. I love it. Because it was just this mess.
It was really weird to see. So this woman's talking, then Peter says, what's your question? Then the guy interrupts and says, you interrupted her. And then I was looking at her face of her, like, just like eventually giving up talking. Like, her own comrade, she called him a comrade.
Yes.
Shut her down. And and Peter did interrupt her, and I knew that was going to happen. Because Peter was interrupting everybody. Just so everybody knows, Peter said to everybody before the Q&A, no pontificating, no anecdotes. Ask your question, we want to get as many in as possible. And sure enough, everybody pontificates. Everybody gives an anecdote. And when they started kind of going on, what's your question? And they're like, how dare you interrupt us?
Yeah.
I like the first question, because the first question was about back in like the 1800s. We saw like black people were advertised as having like lesser lung capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why there weren't black athletes. And the question was, is this memo going to kind of convey the same message but for women? Which I don't know if they gave like the best answer for that. I get what she was saying, and it was a good question. Because it does give you actually some food for thought.
I felt so. Just to quickly reiterate, the statement was that 100 years ago we thought black people had lower lung capacity, so there weren't that many athletes, which we know not to be true. Heather, I felt like, I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody, but I felt like she kind of went on for a long time, like constantly like reiterating the point maybe, but it was a really simple answer. It's not that we just have data from white people. We have data from all cultures and different countries, and we look at that and see where the overlap is. And so our data very well could be incorrect. And yes, it's true that we may be having bad science, but the difference between then and now is that we compare science across cultures, and so we can look at these things with a higher degree of accuracy. But hey, man, I think it's fair to say that was an awesome question, because it's totally possible, yeah, absolutely, that our science is bad. And anybody who's into science knows that we get shit wrong. Oh, I shouldn't swear. We get it wrong all the time. And science continually strives to find the truth and accept when it's wrong and do a better job. And not every scientist does that. I know people who work in science who refuse to give up, certain principles to their detriment. It's like, how many times throughout history there's been doubt over certain new revelations. The scientific community has been resistant, but then younger people come in and things change. So it's very possible that people are holding on to ideas that are outdated. That was great. Can I just say, how awesome is it that there was an adversarial question placed against that kind of broke the circle pat.
Yeah.
Yes.
The circle of back pats, to put it one way. That's what they needed, and that was great. And I think a lot of people probably went, oh.
Yeah, that was a great
point.
first question.
Yeah. Do you have it?
Yeah, I do.
All right, we'll play it. Even though we just basically said the whole thing.
Yeah.
100 years ago, there was data that showed that blacks had lower lung capacity than whites. And this was used to rationalize why there weren't as many African American athletes at the time. How can we be sure we're not doing that again? We have this data. It seems like good data. That seemed like good data then. How can we be sure that we're not attributing these factors that could be cultural reasons why there are fewer women to biological reasons?
That is important. Yeah. That's definitely a very important consideration. And I'm never saying that we should discriminate against women, discourage them from going into tech. Anyone that's interested in tech should go into it. There is definitely issues of discrimination still happening in many sectors. But I think it's important to at least look into this, and because you can use this as a solution. These are some psychological differences on average, and men and women tend to approach the workplace differently. So maybe if we change the workplace, then we could actually solve the problem.
But she had conviction in her voice, though. I think that was the big thing of it. She wasn't nervous. She knew what she wanted to say. She said it, and I thought it was going to set the tone. Yeah, I was wrong. That's a good one at first.
Okay, what really bothered me? There was a guy who walked up, and I understood him perfectly the first time he said it. He stuttered, he stammered. He basically asked the question, and I don't know if we need to show this, but he basically asked, white, cis, heteronormative patriarchy has been the dominant culture, ideology, whatever, and this is the ideology that has shaped the rest of the ideas in science. And his question was, why should we say that everything that's born out of this is the right way to do things, and we don't take other perspectives and other ideologies? And the panel was so damn confused. They didn't understand what he was saying.
Oh, well, the way you worded it.
I know.
Well, I got that too.
So much
I'm a great communicator.
I know.
I understood him.
I was listening, it's a good question. I do feel like the way that he worded it was a little confusing.
Yeah, it was
I
really
agree.
long-winded.
Yeah, very long.
But he also only said the patriarchal part the first time.
Yeah.
When he's asked to reiterate his point, he kept talking about other things.
Yeah.
And that kept confusing Bogosian, who was then trying to just understand what he was saying. And people in the audience were trying to kind of call it out, but then they were also only picking up on one part of it.
Right.
And the guy was really nervous, so...
Yeah, he was shaking. I feel like you need like an SJW to neo-Nazi translator. So I'm joking.
Like everyone needs a Luther?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't think the people on the panel... I don't like using SJW because some people get offended by it. Neo-Nazi is obviously a joke. But when I heard what he said, it was verbose. He was nervous and it was confusing, but I understood what he was saying. Yeah. I was like, I know this argument. I understand. And I kind of just wanted to be like let me explain. Here's what he's saying, because I can make it very easy to understand. And I don't think they actually addressed it properly because I don't think they understood what he was saying.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard when you're on the spot like that for both sides, for the panelists who are supposed to answer a question that they're trying to really tune in and try to pick up what it actually is, and the guy who's trying to condense it into an actual question without losing the context that he was trying to give with it. So.
Yeah, I felt like he seemed scared for a lot of reasons. One, public speaking is scary, no doubt. But also, he's in a room of people he thinks oppose him. Not only that, he's been told time and time again, these are white supremacist Nazis who will kill you. Yeah. But for real, I'm not going to imply that this guy actually thinks everyone's going to kill him. But what do you think's going to happen when the newspapers, when the activists repeatedly tell these younger people, they will kill you? Are they going to want to show up to your event and talk to you? No, and maybe that's on purpose. But this guy was scared, and I wouldn't doubt that he was probably like, these are Charlottesville people. You know what I mean? To actually,
I don't know if they were actually being billed as Charlottesville.
No. But what I'm saying is look at what Chelsea Manning does, calling Cassandra Fairbanks Charlottesville. Like, equating Cassandra Fairbanks, who was like a former Bernie supporter, who's never been associated with the alt-right. She's never, like, called herself that, like some people have.
You might be shortchanging his viewpoint, though. You don't necessarily know that he buys into all that.
No. I don't mean to speak for him specifically.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is that, like, what do you think's going to happen when Chelsea Manning goes up and says Cassandra Fairbanks is one of the organizers of Charlottesville, or implies it, and says these are the alt-right who are working, like, with neo-Nazis, which is, like, so far from the truth. People are going to see Cassandra. They're going to see these events. Like, look, they call Brett Weinstein a white supremacist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they equate that with Charlottesville. I'm not saying specifically right now. I'm saying there are instances where activists do that. And it is my opinion that there are going to be activists who don't know that much who think Brett Weinstein is in the same camp as Charlottesville. And they're going to be scared. Mm-hmm. You know, it's going to stifle conversation.
Well, that was... so because I live in Olympia and I live next to Evergreen, my neighbors actually work on campus. And I talked to them right afterward. I'll scoot in a little bit. I talked to them right afterward, and I'd asked them like kind of what their thoughts were on Brett Weinstein, and they go like, "Oh, well, he is a bad guy because he went on Fox." Wasn't what he said was bad. It was that he went on Fox, and I'm like, "But did you listen to what he said on Fox? Did you listen to what he said about this day of absence? Like everything he said makes sense. Like he's advocating for true equality here, right? Or the idea of not forcing people out because of their race." Mm-hmm. And they were like, "Well, he no one on campus likes him," and this they're very nice people, my neighbors. But they just very much were in that mindset. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's not go down any further down this path.
Yep. So we talked with James Damore about, for one, this is great. So I don't know how long the interview is, but it's not short. So we're going to jump into that now, and you'll get to see that. But James is an expert, all right? And say he's the expert. But one of the things I really wanted to bring up with this interview, which you'll see right now, is that James is a scientist. So let's just jump right in. You're a scientist. You were a scientist at Ivy League universities. When I first heard your story, I read your memo, and I was kind of like, okay, like that seems relatively, tepid. Like I didn't find it controversial. I understand why people did. So I looked you up on LinkedIn, and I saw that you were a research scientist. You study computational biology. It's a bit verbose, but basically, I feel like what's been underrepresented in the conversation about you is that you're actually not just an engineer, you are a scientist. Right. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your experience? I mean, are you an expert?
There's obviously people that know more about these things than I do, but I was studying evolutionary biology, and I did a lot of psychology in undergrad, and all different sciences. So yeah, I don't try to really bring that up too much, just because I feel like that's an appeal to authority rather than just talking about the evidence. But it is something that my opponents say never bring up.
Yeah. Actually, there was a woman that I was introduced to at the event, and I brought up how one thing that I never understood is that people act like you don't know what you're talking about, and you know better than a lot of people. And again, yeah, you're right. I don't want to appeal to authority either, but I do have respect for your experience actually at these prestigious schools. But this woman said to me, "Oh, no, he's just an engineer." And I was like, "No, he's actually a scientist." I'm not saying you're the best scientist in the world and most famous or anything, but I wanted to bring that up, because I feel like too often in a lot of political arguments, authority is ignored, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of democratization of information. So just because I went to Harvard doesn't mean that I'm the only people that go to Harvard can speak about these things. You can read a lot of this in books, and a lot of these peer-reviewed articles are online. And so I definitely just try to cite the evidence as it is, and then have the discussion at that level.
Yeah, I guess it's unfortunate then that the politics become about you as an individual. Because I you know what, man? I guess I didn't really think about that. I have a lot of respect for you actually not bringing up the fact that you have some credentials. Yeah. So I guess the next question is, we were actually talking a little bit on the way here about the woman who got thrown out after trying to pull she disabled the audio system or something. She got cited. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that kind of protest because of you.
It's definitely sad. I would want to know really where she's coming from and how to have a conversation with them where they feel like just me talking isn't a danger to the world, and how they feel like the only solution is to use force rather than actually engage in dialogue.
You wrote something recently. I'm going to forget the name. It was the
Case for Diversity.
The Case for Diversity. So you know better than I do. And my understanding is that you are for diversity. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that and explain what that piece was about?
Yeah, so I went through the different arguments for and against diversity and the different nuances that you really have to address when you're looking at diversity. So, because one thing is, I am for diversity. I like meeting different types of people and having a variety of conversations, but I'm sort of just allergic to BS, and that's sort of what's forced me to write that memo. Is just I just saw so many falsehoods, and it really hurts the cause if you're just lying to try to advance it. And so there's many things that these diversity advocates lie about in order to advance their cause. Like they say that diversity is good for business, and then they imply, oh yes, then therefore we need these quotas. And so the diversity is good for business is actually a very complicated thing, and it's mostly that you want to have a variety of viewpoints, and then people assume that having racial and gender diversity will solve that. But the evidence is actually pretty mixed on that, and there's really not much of a link between diversity and business profits. But that doesn't mean that there aren't actual moral reasons that you would want to have equal opportunity. But having quotas, for example, actually makes both men and women less likely to apply, and so it's actually bad for business in that way. And but people will cite this as, oh, because diversity is so great for business, we need to start doing this preferential hiring, which really creates these stigmas against the people that you're trying to help. And so I just feel like you really need to look at the evidence to solve that.
I feel it, man. It's like a meme now how often I bring up that I'm mixed race, because I don't bring it up for people who watch my videos because they know, but I bring it up because it's like the people who are bringing up this diversity stuff tend to be white and then criticize me. So it's one of the things I bring this up because you brought up on the panel that you could have a black trans woman, but if her ideas don't fit the mold, she's not considered diverse, right?
Yeah, and you'll see this too in politics where, would you want Ivanka Trump to be a senator because then that would be increasing the representation of women in the Senate? No, because she doesn't have the correct politics.
It's almost like your gender, your identity, your race aren't as important as the work you do, the ideas you have, and even they acknowledge that to an extent. So, in the memo, the first thing they brought up was that you said it's not an argument against diversity. I think you mentioned a little bit that you were for diversity. Was that? I don't want to mischaracterize you. Even after prefacing your memo and saying that in the event, those protesters, they didn't care. They didn't change their view of you. They weren't willing to listen to you. And you're saying a lot of things I kind of relate to, because I've also made documentaries and news pieces that would benefit their point of view, but they still attack me the same. I'm wondering, do you have any ideas of what it would take to actually, you flat out tell these people, you write the case for diversity, but it's not enough. Do you feel that there's a solution for reaching these people?
I think you have to be really gentle, speak their language, and just sneak it in somehow. But it's becoming more difficult all the time to be able to talk about these things, because one side will have one dialect of these are the forbidden things that you can't talk about, and then another side will say, oh no, if you even bring up diversity, then I'm gonna stop thinking or stop listening to you. So you really have to cater your message to the audience, but then you sound like some partisan to the other side, and then if you try to talk too little and just remove emotion from it, then no one listens. So.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so surprised I've been able to get as many subscribers on YouTube as I have, because I'm not overtly a partisan. I'm not going to just attack somebody. I'll actually even defend people I disagree with. And it's bad for business. It really is, because telling people what they want to hear, they're gonna just jump right in. They're gonna agree with you. So I do want to mention that, watching the panel, and this is not a reflection on you, but I felt like Peter was a bit hostile. He said you're coward. No, actually that might have been Brett. I think there was a bit. Brett said that if you leave. No, what's this, Peter? I'm sorry, I don't want to mischaracterize anybody. Yeah, someone said if you get up and leave without asking the question, it's cowardly.
It's Brett.
Yeah, it was Brett. And I felt like you're starting off from an adversarial standpoint, and then with even Peter it was a bit aggressive. So I feel like at these events there's a lot of everyone patting each other on the back. Who agrees with you, and everyone's going to sit there and smile because they already think what you're saying. They know what you're going to say, they think it. And then when you have the protesters and you come off in kind of an adversarial way, it's going to be divisive a bit. I don't know if you felt the same way. Do you think that, let me put it a better way, do you think that the event was a success in maybe reaching some naysayers and also helping to enlighten those who might already agree with you?
Yeah, it's hard to say if it actually changed anyone's minds. I do think that, if there was more disagreement on the panel, that may have helped things. It's just really difficult to talk about all these different issues while having disagreement and actually having a conversation. You really can never make it so that everyone's happy.
I think that's the secret.
Yeah, I think the solution is partly, at least, to have people come up and ask questions to challenge the panel. That's just what happened.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Did you hear of anything about the counter events that they held at Portland State?
Yeah, I heard a little bit. I had wished I'd come earlier so I could actually see what happened. But I couldn't see them. I don't know if you guys.
We heard from someone that it was relatively empty. That at least today.
The one today.
There were other events, but the one today.
Yeah.
There was free food. I'm surprised.
So the other ones that they had, they were from the videos that I saw of it, they were fairly attended. There were some viewpoints that didn't make a whole lot of sense, and I think there were some viewpoints that I'm not sure if they were familiar with the memo at all, but they made some good points. Do you think it's more productive to have counter events than people just showing up and
circle jerk?
I didn't want to say that, but do you think it's more effective to have those counter events, even if some of them are coming at it from a skewed angle, rather than having people show up and ask questions?
I think a combination is probably good. Not everyone is willing to come and ask a question, especially if maybe the majority of the audience already agreed with us, say, and there was the minority that was disagreeing. It's really challenging and hard to go up there and ask a question when maybe the audience will be jeering at you or something. So you have to appreciate those that had the courage to do that. And yeah, I hope or wish that there was maybe more disagreement on the panel that would have helped some things. And one thing that I brought up was maybe just have another event too, maybe a minor one, where it was explicitly people that disagree with us. It's hard to coordinate these events, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think it was Brett did I think do a good thing by saying, trying to plead with the people who are going to do the walkout not to walk out, because I think that did keep a lot of people from leaving midway. And even if some of the questions were a little, I don't want to say circle jerky, but you had those people, like I'm specifically thinking the three people who stood up didn't really have much of a question, but kind of wanted to make their case. Do you think that they dealt with that in a good way?
The panel dealt with it?
Yeah.
In a good way? Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like I couldn't really understand where they were going, so I wish I could hear more from them, but then again, that's taking time from the other people.
Totally, yeah.
It felt like for them it was mostly about just making their presence known. It was an emotional release to be there to challenge you. You know, whether or not their question was articulated properly enough to the point where people could actually ask it, and then it kind of just fell apart. But to them, I'd imagine they left and said, "We did it." You know, so. What really bums me out with all of this is that it feels like at the end of the day, when the dissenters leave, they've learned nothing, and the people who are all sitting there watching obviously all agree with each other. I mean, even now, everyone here at this pizza joint, like I know for the most part we're going to be like, I agree. You know, it's not a diverse. We're not a group. I don't think we have a lot of diversity of thought here. A little bit. There's disagreements, but for the most part, we agree.
Yeah, and I think some of the most important questions were maybe. Well, one, the ones that disagree, but also like how can we actually have more conversations? And that was a really important one.
All right, here's the big question. What do you want? What's your mission?
I want to be happy. Sure. I want other people to be happy. I want people to be able to discuss things without, having to self-censor and feel bad about it. And I just don't like having these taboo subjects where you can't discuss at all, and that actually harming the solution because you can't actually get at it.
Yeah, why not? So we have touched on this a little bit already, but one of the last questions that you asked was an effective way to bridge. The gist of the interview, we talked about how do you get people to actually communicate with each other? Does it make more sense to have counter events and pro events, or to actually mix together? But you were talking about the audience that showed up, so if you want to riff on that and just
when I was talking to audience members, attendees who were coming before the event, they were all standing in line, and I just kind of went around with a camera and asked, does anyone want to talk about why they're out here?
I read an article that PSU put out in which the professor interviewing James, can't remember his last name, he said that in order for you to really have your own beliefs or to have any ground underneath your beliefs, you need to understand the adverse to your beliefs. And so I'm here today to hear him out. I'm very interested to see how he supports his arguments. I've read the memo, but I'm very interested to see what he has to say. Coming into it, I'm trying not to disagree too much already. I'm trying not to have too much of an emotional response. As somebody studying science, as a woman studying science here at Portland State University, I'll be very interested to see if he has any logical missteps or how he really supports what he's saying tonight. So I'm here to hear him out. And I think everybody, in order to promote more civil discourse in this time of likes and dislikes, I am trying to spread a personal message as well to hear out the other side. I think it's very important to listen out.
Great. And what are you studying?
I study environmental science and management here at Portland State. I'm a third-year student.
What he said is there's science backing what he said, and that people are pointing to the evidence that shows he didn't say anything outrageous. He said things that psychologists have found through testing over years and across cultures. And so it's actually a little, in one way, it's a little baffling to see the extreme reaction that happened. In another way, just based on what's going on in our society right now, it's not. But I would think that a lot of people who are misconstruing it haven't actually read it, actually read the whole thing. It doesn't take that long. But yeah, I think it's misplaced criticism, and I think the reason that it's being misconstrued is because people don't want to engage on the actual issues. Great. Because it raises questions that might be uncomfortable for some people.
Yeah. So she was just there to attend.
Yeah, she was just curious about what Damore had to say and what Heather had to say.
Isn't it amazing what happens when you read the memo? Yeah, right? Your mind gets blown.
So that interview, it seems the people who know Heather know that, Heather and Brett, for instance, they're not evil people.
Yeah.
They're not Nazis, white supremacists. And that the memo is actually relatively tepid, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, how many times can you do a video, like even now, where we're like, the memo was boring. The memo was not that bad. It's being misrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this story is interesting because we have, like, anti-science, we have fake news, and we have regressive politics. It's like a trifecta of the culture war. I don't know.
I kind of feel like in regards to Silicon Valley and the whole gender diversity topic involving there, this memo kind of like blew a lot of it open because it really showed how it's not as, there's reasons but why things happen. And the response from like the tech community was more like, well, we can't have this. Like, we can't have there be any kind of spotlight on the situation. That's why we got to get rid of it. And I think that was a big push because they were able to spin it, tech bro and all this kind of stuff that just made like no sense.
But you know what? I think the reality is simple. We didn't really talk about this too much, but the National Labor Relations Board issued a statement about James Damore saying it was legal what they did, even though he withdrew his complaint. They still made the statement, and I think the reason Google did what they did is fairly obvious. It doesn't matter if James Damore is right. The law will penalize Google if they make a statement that is perceived to be discriminatory. If it is factually true that there is more variation among male intelligence versus female, that means the bell curve of intelligence is wider in men, okay? Again, I'll reiterate, there are more stupid men, but more smart men. Overall intelligence tend to be fairly average between men and women. If that is true, that statement can get a company in deep, I'm not going to swear, trouble. Because it is discriminatory to say that there are more smart men. Yeah. It is discriminatory against men to say there are more stupid men, even if it's true. So Google does what the only thing they can is say promote diversity because that's the law. Otherwise, we're going to get fined. We're going to get in trouble. We'll get sued. The National Labor Relations Board sided with Google that James Damore memo was discriminatory, was sexist.
Well, they actually said on there that it was the idea there ultimately was to try to nip this in the bud.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that he created a hostile work environment. It was that he possibly could one day, I don't know, kind of create one. And that was all it was. It was just, it's like, oh, he maybe could offend somebody. Maybe at one point in time they might get mad. Never mind the fact that he was getting death threats from Google employees, and they just got a slap on the wrist.
And
that was it.
He mentioned on the panel, he said this before, that he got fired from home via phone call because the threats against him from other employees kept him from coming to work.
Yeah.
Think about the precedent being set by what the National Labor Relations Board says. You're a company. You're an evil capitalist pig with a cigar twirling your mustache, and you want to fire someone illegally. So you accuse them of making a comment.
Well, so that's the person who let's see, the labor board lawyer, their conclusion. I thought this was an interesting quote, was that in the course of protesting working conditions, you can be profane and aggressive and unpleasant. You can be militant, and it's protected. However, what separates this is its derisiveness and stereotypical characterization of one gender. So because...
Did they read it?
I'm pretty sure they would, but again, it goes back to the hostile work environment.
Yep.
Because he said something that people perceived as stereotypical, and it created a hostile work environment. I think
also because he sent it off through Google's network, or internal network, and then that went around, and then it got leaked, and then it blew up. Had it not been leaked, I don't think he would have been fired.
Exactly. Google didn't care, but it's the bad PR.
Yeah.
But so what? A hostile work environment. Okay, what if you said something like, only losers have iPhones, and then all of the the tech people with iPhones got offended by that. Now they hate you. No, but think about this. It says you can be militant, right? Mm-hmm. Well, certainly that creates a hostile work environment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What if you were like, I want a union, and someone says I don't, and then you start swearing at them, attacking them, saying crazy ass, stuff. I'm trying not to swear. Is that not a hostile work environment? It's crazy how political everything is. It's like ideology behind everything.
Well, and I think that's why that quote spoke to me the most. It's James is not aggressive. He is not militant. He is not. He's none of those things. Yet he managed to cause one of the biggest controversies.
But yeah. Going back to the when I mentioned like the trifecta, I was thinking about what this kind of. I'm just thinking, and I'm like, it seems like the tech bro stuff, women in STEM, gender differences, you have regressive politics, all these things. And James Damore was like sitting on the volcano, and then when all of it bubbles up and explodes, it shoots him straight into the air. When we did this interview with him, I don't know the right way to describe it, but he seems like a bit, I don't know if unassuming is the right word. He kind of just stumbled into this by just writing something. And he's not like a public speaker a politician who goes out and seeks the attention. He's just some guy who wrote this thing, and all of a sudden now he is the epicenter of this debate.
Yeah, like I think when we talked to Weinstein and Heather a couple weeks ago, I thought Weinstein had a really good point where he was just like, they put it forward as if it was a problem. Let's fix the diversity. And of course, you put that in front of engineers, you're going to be like, okay, it's a problem. Let me fix it.
It's binary. I mean, it's ones and zeros. I can solve this very easily. Right. But he even says that too. He goes like, I just wanted to think of a way to fix this problem. And then there was a comment there that Heather had made about how for every 4 male employees, there's 1 female hire. So, 20% female. Then out of all, computer science degrees, it's the same ratio. So Google is just hiring at the ratio that it's coming out.
Yep.
And that's like, okay, wow. Once they said that, I thought like, oh, holy crap.
Sounds pretty like nothing.
Like, this is the biggest nothing burger ever. How did we get here again?
And I think I said this in the beginning, but the memo was actually talking about helping encouraging more women to come into STEM.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, he put forward proposals that might help. And it's like,
if
you're misogynistic and you don't want women, or whatever the arguments are that he's sexist and misogynistic, like, then why would he offer solutions?
Okay. The memo never says women are less capable, never says they're inferior. It simply says that men and women kind of prefer different things sometimes. And that maybe if we, like, I may be being too biased when I say this, but to me the memo is basically like, our workplace needs to accommodate women more because it doesn't. It sounded like he was trying to end the patriarchy, dare I say it. No, seriously. The work environment was very beneficial to the male mind, and that if we want women in, we need to make it beneficial to the female mind, and that was sexist. It's crazy.
Well, even during the panel, and I have a clip of this, where he talks about like, it was at the very beginning, what he saw as the problems, and it was inclusion, that people were being excluded.
Yep.
And he was trying to.
What did that one woman say? I forget her name. The English lady.
Helen.
Thank you. Sorry, I have trouble with their names. She had said that when it comes to inclusion, the idea there is that basically the minority of the minority is what gets excluded because they don't fit in that tiny little box. Which I thought was another profound statement. There's a lot of good moments in this panel. Yeah, I just liked what she said there because I think that's a lot of what he was working for too. Is just, you can't ever speak out against the oppressed, because even if you are one, you're not going to fit in that box. Therefore, you're now an outsider.
And so yeah, this is interesting. One thing I think we should hit on is that they said diversity isn't what matters. Like, what does diversity mean? Diversity of thought or diversity of skin color and gender? And the point they bring up was a black conservative trans woman is not allowed. It's not an oppressed figure. They're internalizing the patriarchy or whatever, and their thoughts are excluded from the group. So certainly if they believe, when they say like diversity is important, well, there are many individuals who are, females who are anti-feminist, black people who are anti, Black Lives Matter, trans people who are anti, intersectional, and their opinions are considered wrong and they're excluded from the group. They're attacked. Like Blair White, for instance, went to a protest, Blair White, a trans woman, and was physically attacked and had her fingernail ripped off. Yeah. So it's not about diversity, is it? The fact that I bring this up all the time, like a white dude is going to walk up to me and scream at me that I'm a white supremacist, when this is like, you're literally a white guy yelling at a mixed person. I just don't understand the logic. But to me that says it's not really about diversity. It's about tribal power, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, if your viewpoint doesn't line up, then you've got issues.
Well, that was the thing with Blair, is Blair went to a protest on Hollywood Boulevard wearing the MAGA hat, and the guy who attacked her was wearing a pink pussy hat.
Oh god. So
I mean, it's the most like cartoonish thing ever, in my opinion.
Seriously.
Simply because of just the elements involved.
Yeah.
Right. Like they wore the hat all day through West Hollywood. No problem, because no one there cares in West Hollywood. ultimately. And then they went to Hollywood Boulevard, and that was where there was an actual anti-Trump protest where the tempers were already flaring. And so that's going to be another factor into the overall situation. And I think oftentimes context in these situations matter. The situation in Silicon Valley with gender diversity and the hiring really makes it hard to have the discussion, because if you come at it from just a very logical, rational perspective, it is sexist, apparently.
Peter is a professor, Portland State. He has like a series of bodyguards who are Brazilian jiu-jitsu masters, like, is the craziest thing ever. There's like, first of all, the dude we interviewed is massive.
Yeah,
it was like 6'6".
7, maybe?
Yeah, just a really tall guy. And we got to talking a little bit, and I was actually kind of concerned a little bit, maybe, but just, I don't know what the right word is. Wow. When we left the event, we all got ushered out the back door, surrounded by police and bodyguards. Is that really what it's come to at college? You know, like the violence, the protests?
It is Portland State University, so...
Oh, it's that dangerous. Well, Portland is where that guy drew the gun that one time, right? There was that protest, and there was one guy, and he drew his pistol, I think. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that one specifically.
It was a Black Lives Matter protest. I'm pretty sure it was Portland. I could be wrong, but there was
during the Not My President protest, which went on for like 5 days, by the way. There was someone who was killed while they were protesting on the bridge, but that was actually a random car pulled up, shot a guy, and then drove off. Yeah, it was like a gang thing.
Right? Oh, okay.
Not related to the protest. The guy died, not related to the gang member, but that was just what happened. So, yeah, Portland's kind of a wild place.
We interviewed Matt, who was, I believe he was the head of security, and should we play the interview? It's my understanding that you were security for the event. Is that accurate?
For Pete.
For Pete, specifically. Do you want to just introduce yourself and explain your background a little bit?
Sure. My name's Matt Thornton. I've been Pete's friend for quite a long time. I'm a full-time martial arts instructor. I've been teaching for about 25 years. I run an organization called SBG. We have about 100 locations around the world. And we deal with everything from military training to mixed martial arts athletes to the average student or average client is just someone that's a hobbyist who's trying to get in shape and learn self-defense.
Cool. The reason I want to talk to you, we just got out of this event. There was some agitation, I guess. The protester tried to break some sound equipment. But when I heard that Pete had some pretty proficient security, I don't want to say alarmed, but a little bit maybe. That, do you think, does Pete really need that kind of protection here in Portland at a university? Is there a real risk of violence at these events?
Well, they always receive what are actually pretty serious threats, death threats, threats of personal violence by the same political groups that tend to show up. Those always have to be taken seriously, which is why you see campus police there, and usually, depending on the talk, there'll be one or two sometimes. Plainclothes PD as well. And of course, they're on the radio and they have a very quick response time here. Flip side, if you're asking me how seriously I take it, I don't take it too seriously because they're always threatening that kind of stuff, and the rhetoric is always over the top. And usually they're younger kids that will do things like we saw today, where they'll disrupt the event and pull some cords and yell and scream, but as soon as the campus police comes in, they tend to go away quietly, and that's been my experience here in Portland. With rare exception, they had a riot, of course, after the election, but generally speaking, that tends to be the case. So, I'm not too worried about it, but I am alert, and I just try and keep aware of it in case anything happens, and if things do go bad, then my job is just to make sure Pete and whoever his guest is leaves, and we get out of there without any violence happening.
Yeah, when we left today, it was like we were ushered out the back, because James Damore obviously is probably a big target.
Right.
But I guess when I hear you say that this rhetoric is all the time, isn't there a risk maybe that you get complacent?
Yes.
You get so used to it that maybe you don't take it seriously enough?
Right. So when I say I wasn't overly concerned about it, it's not to say I wasn't aware of it. So generally speaking, I'm trying to keep an eye on everybody that's around Pete, people that are walking up towards us, people that are entering the event, what their general demeanor is, what they're carrying on their person, what kind of clothing they have, what they might be concealing, what are their hands doing, and all that kind of stuff. And that's exactly the same kind of thing that the campus police will get from the outside of the event as people are walking in. I just try and be aware of what's going on, and as you should generally be. I'm a little more aware, of course, because A, that's kind of what I'm helping Pete do for me. That's my job at the time. and be the circumstances.
So let me just, I don't know, ask you kind of political-ish kind of question. Is it kind of crazy that a professor at university needs your kind of protection?
It's absolutely crazy. And you were there and you met James Damore, and he's just such a nice, very mild-mannered guy. I read the memo. I didn't find anything particularly insane about it. I'm sure there's things to disagree about it as adults, but yeah, the response is just says it all. It's absolutely over the top.
Now I want to expand a little bit from that, because I've been on the ground at a lot of these protests. We just were at University of Washington, where anti-fascist protesters clashed with, these right-wing rally goers. A lot of people I talk to say that they feel like it's dying down, that they don't see this kind of escalation continuing. So I'm just wondering I don't know if you've been paying attention to a lot of the news over the last year with the rallies and the violence in the streets, but do you think it's going to bubble up based on your understanding of this of like security and things? Do you think it'll continue? Do you think it's going to simmer down a bit, maybe?
It's a good question. I think it will continue. I think it'll be sporadic. I think it'll depend on the event. I think anytime you have opposing, the most dangerous circumstances when you actually do have a speaker that's someone an extreme point of view, which these guys are not, and they bring with them their own contingency. And then you have two ideologically opposed groups of lunatics outside that are going to fight with each other, and that's when you really have the problems. When you have something like this, where you have just some professors that are trying to have a conversation about free speech or biology, and you have one group that is threatening violence, it tends to be kind of a facade today. Not to minimize it, but if the police are there and there's not a counter group to push back, usually it solves itself.
Well, sometimes the police are the counter group, right?
Yeah, they have to be, right?
That's their job. So. I've seen a lot of protests where, actually I should say most protests, you don't actually, and a lot of the times, you don't see the left wing fighting the right wing. You see the police separating the two, and then the left wing attacking the police.
Yeah.
Or the police moving in, making arrests maybe because things got out of hand, but it's almost like the police are the counterforce in a lot of these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they have a tough job. They're always a target.
I probably get some flack for this from activists, but I felt like the police today dealt with that woman very well. They talked to her, and she actually said some nice things about them. She said things. I think she said something like "I understand" and "Thank you." And one of the cops actually, when they let her go with citation, tried going after her to talk to her again, like yell her name, but she just stormed off. I was really impressed with it because I think one of the big problems we have is a disconnect between police and the people they're policing. And so it was really interesting to see that, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was unsurprised by that. The American police overall tend to do a fantastic job when you look at the data. 330 million people in this country of very diverse cultures and viewpoints, unlike a lot of other nations. And overall, the police usually handle it really well. And here in Portland, we have a very good police department. And in a campus situation like that, these guys are very aware of trying not to let the situation escalate.
Yeah.
And you have to have the patience of Joe to work that job, right?
I've seen some bad policing, where the police absolutely caused the escalation. In New York, during the Occupy stuff, the police, the most famous incident is when Anthony Bologna in New York pepper sprayed those women on the sidewalk. In my opinion, he caused Occupy Wall Street. That video went viral. It was unnecessary. Sure. There have been a lot of instances where I also want to point out, I always say simply because you see these big problems doesn't mean it's prevalent. It's it could just be these incidents are high profile because they're so egregious, but it happens rarely. I don't know the statistics. I don't want to, I don't want to get flagged for it. But yeah, I've definitely seen instances where that's been the case.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, you have any questions?
So at a lot of these events, I see people trying to agitate others and trying to get somebody else to throw the first punch. From your experience, is there any good de-escalation tactics that you would recommend for people?
The best de-escalation tactic is always distance. So if there's any possible way to put your distance between yourself and the person that's trying to agitate you or the person that's a threat, then that's what you always want to do. And as obvious as that message is, it's very important. And you will feel when somebody is an actual physical threat. We have millions of years of evolution. And there are things you can look for and things I can teach you to look for, but you have your own instincts that you can learn to trust. People get into problems. The major problem people have with the average person has when they become a victim of violence, almost every single time, is they ignore those instincts. And if you interview them and you ask them the right questions, you'll find out every single time that there was a moment where those instincts arose in them and they chose to overlook it, often for good reasons. They want to think the best of people, they want to assume the best in people's intentions, and then things go bad. So my answer to that is you don't want to escalate the situation. But if those instincts are going off in you, then you need to make distance between yourself and the threat, whether it's an event like this or anywhere else. And if you do that on a consistent basis, then I think, generally speaking, as an American, most people will be pretty safe.
You know what's really interesting to me is I've been all over the world. I've been to some pretty dangerous places, and America's really comfortable and safe. You know, I've been to places where we can't do this.
Exactly.
You know, especially with a camera.
Right.
Yeah. And so I guess one thing that's really interesting to me is, this may be too political, but I wonder why so many people think America is so unsafe, that it's so bad.
Right.
And certainly we have our problems that should be fixed.
Right.
But man, when I come back to that border, I'm like, I feel a sigh of relief because I know we have a constitution, we have safeguards. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on why people might think America's so bad.
When you ask the majority of people about violence, the majority will tell you it's getting worse.
Yeah.
Conservatives and progressives will say it's getting worse, and that's just not the case. The shootings, even we've had spikes, and there are areas and neighborhoods like Chicago, as an example, where the shootings have gone up almost to what they were in the early 90s. But overall, if you talk about nationwide, it's about half of what it was just 30 years ago. And when I was a kid in the 70s, it was far more violent than it is now. If you ask the average person, they just have no idea. Why that is, I think, is just a case of the media. We don't hear about anything but violence on the national news, which used to be 6 o'clock for 30 minutes after dinner or whatever, and now it's 24-hour news and whatever they can find, and I think that's a symptom of that.
Yeah. You know, it gets traffic.
It gets traffic.
Sensationalism.
It leads.
So we were told you have a book coming out.
Yes, been working on it for a very long time. I'm hoping to finish it up in the next 2 months and definitely have it out this year.
What's that about?
It's about violence, in particular violence as it relates to individual and staying safe, and also just people's relationship to violence. I think sometimes, because it's so biologically rooted within our DNA, like sex and other issues, it tends to become repressed, or it becomes a fetish and glorified, neither of which I think is healthy. So I'd like people to actually take a look at the subject with open eyes and come to a healthy relationship with the topic, which is kind of like
I'm curious kind of about motivations as well, especially at political events where people think that the best way to get their message across is to punch someone in the face. Do you have any ideas about that?
You know, that's as much of a mystery to me as it is probably to you. The idea that you're going to change someone's point of view by hitting them. If you look at the data across the board for who commits violence, whether you're talking about rape or assault or even homicide, the perpetrators are almost always the greatest. If we divide it up, it's going to be between 19 and 20. But it begins about age 15, and it disappears to almost nothing by about the age of 23. So the majority of aggressors are between the ages of 15 and 23. And there's a lot of different factors that play into that, but if I was just going to put it under one umbrella term, I'd say it's maturity. And that real lack of maturity, whether in terms of impulse control, empathy, and the ability to foresee what your actions might lead to in a short amount of time, all of which people from the ages of 15 to 23 tend to have less of, and some have much less than others. Those lend themselves to people thinking, well, if I punch this person in the head, then it'll be okay. And if they find a support group that identifies that as being okay because that person happens to be of a particular ideology and now it's okay to hit them, then it's great because now they've found an outlet for this lack of maturity that they have. And it's very difficult to get somebody out of that, especially young men without mentors and people around them that will tell them that this is not the correct way to behave. If you remove that group, usually of older males who can put them in their place, and they have no one around them like that, then there's really nothing to stop them other than the police. And that's when you wind up needing a lot of police. As soon as you find areas that lack lots of dads, you're going to find areas that need lots of police.
The important thing I want to take out of that interview is when I asked him, because I ask everybody this, and I'll ask you this, Mr. MundaneMatt. I ask everybody, do you think the violence is going to escalate? Because, so I asked Lacey Green, and she said she thinks it's done. I said, I think it's winter. It's winter, it's cold, people don't come out. We asked this gentleman, Matt, and he said he thinks it will continue. And this is a guy who's an expert, security, he works all over the world. So, important point, and I think people should consider. And now I'll just throw it to you. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see more street battles, bashing, violence? Yeah.
I do. Well, and part of me goes back to what we just learned the other day about the Russian interference on Facebook, where they were creating protests for anti-Trump and protests for pro-Trump and pitting them together at the same time. Now, don't get me wrong. That's a masterful troll job, right? It is remarkable, and I have to give them respect. I hate it. But at the same time, the troll in me is like, okay. But so they did that, and so yes, that kind of division, that kind of anger that permeates on social media will manifest itself in reality at these events, and people are only going to get more angry as this division continues to happen, and you're going to get more people coming out. We're going to get more events like Charlottesville, where there's going to be complications in containing it, and then it's going to merge both groups together, whether it's the fault of the police or the protesters or counter-protesters or whatever, I don't know yet, and that's going to happen, and we're going to get more people like Heather Heyer that are just going to be casualties of a really bad situation.
Yeah, man. It's almost like you can't convince people not to hit each other, too. Because you've got factions, and I will say, in my opinion, it's mostly Antifa. Like, they come to run-of-the-mill conservative events and attack people.
Yeah.
Certainly the far right, you've got these lone nut jobs who go out and do substantially worse things than Antifa. I think the way I try to explain to people is people are like, Tim, you don't criticize the right enough. It's like, well, hold on. How often do we have a right-wing nut job shooting something up? It happens. There's these spikes. And when they happen, I talk about it. How often do we have these lower-level attacks by Antifa, like we saw at the Cernovich event where the guy got choked, strangled by a guy? Those certainly aren't as bad. They're terrible, but they're not nearly as bad as a guy pulling a rifle out and shooting up a school or something. But the Antifa stuff happens more frequently, so there's more to talk about. Certainly when the shootings happen, I just made 2 videos about about it. It's like, I absolutely talk about breaking news when it happens. So it seems to me like when we talk about far-right extremism, it's rare but ridiculously bad. And then we talk about far-left extremism, it's common and not nearly as bad, but still pretty bad.
I don't know if I would say it's rare, though. Because,
like far-right shootings and stuff?
Well, there's a difference between shootings and hate crimes. Shootings obviously fall into hate
crime. But is a hate crime far-right extremism? Is it?
Well, if you talk to the left, yes.
Because, I know.
Because the left doesn't see anything they do as a hate crime.
But I mean like politically motivated, organized. Like if there's like a racist guy who attacks another person because he's racist, it's like, is that the same as Antifa organizing an event?
No, it is different.
Is it the same as Charlottesville where a guy gets in a car at a protest and crashes into people? It's like there's street crime and hate crime as a factor. And there's certainly instances of Antifa people bashing people randomly in the street too. I mean,
sure, yeah.
I guess I think it is fair to bring up hate crimes, but I think just for the sake of this discussion, we're talking about, politically motivated terror ish things, intimidation, attacks specifically.
In mass, or just in general?
I think it's hard to quantify, but maybe just like in an organized fashion to some degree.
Right.
Like a planned event where someone buys a gun and then shows up on the day they knew they were going to do it.
Well, yeah, because I feel like at that point it also comes down to mob mentality, where you have a lot of Antifa getting together in a group, and then you're going to get some problems, and you get a lot of white supremacists in a group. They're gonna cause some problems.
Well, I feel like with the white supremacists, it's more of the lone gunman approach oftentimes, and so. If you look at Timothy McVeigh was relatively isolated, and that's one of the things that kind of radicalized him is they were able to put that in his head. Whereas the left and Antifa, they're very community based, and so they do meet frequently, and so there's not a lot of loners that are going to come out of that. They're going to work with the mob, work with that group, and the right doesn't necessarily always have that, because anytime they meet, it's met with this, you're just going to go burn a cross somewhere or something, and I think that's where the divide comes, because it's always like it's a lone gunman situation, like the guy who shot the abortion clinic, and the guy from Nicholas Cruz or whatever from Florida the other
isolated loners.
Yeah, that's what we see a lot out of the right, and they get a lot of their They might find each other online, but they find each other kind of through backdoor channels, I feel like. And then they're just kind of alone getting that propaganda, getting fed that info. And the other side, they come together.
Yeah.
And they recruit in these schools.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get really conservative clubs much on these college campuses. They exist, but they're usually kind of like Reaganites, the best way I can describe it. And you're not going to get a lot of loners out of that. But I think that's what we're seeing. And I guess it's, I wish more people would say something if they see something.
So, I guess final assessment. James Damore is an interesting guy who's been very mischaracterized, and political violence is probably going to escalate. We saw protesters here today. There was some disruption. It wasn't that bad, but certainly last week at University of Washington we saw some violence. So perhaps as things warm up, it'll get worse.
We shall see.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you for hanging out and being a guest to talk about stuff. For those that are watching, you can follow me on Twitter at TimCast. Subscribe for new videos every day at 4 p.m. We do this podcast every Sunday. And next week, it's going to be awesome because we've already got something lined up. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's going to be great. So come back tomorrow at 4 because I'll have another video for you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys want to drop your social media or whatever so we know where to find you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at MomesMolly, MomesMolli.
Just YouTube, or Google MundaneMatt and you'll see this face.
There you go. Yeah, your YouTube, YouTube, Twitter, etc.
Pretty much. I've branded it.
You've branded it.
There we go.
MundaneMatt. Hey, man, but seriously, thanks for coming on. And
thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys. I'll see you tomorrow, and then we'll see you next week.